It's often said that imitation is the best form of flattery, a way of showing your unwavering appreciation for another person. But when video games do it, it's seen as a lazy cash grab, a money machine created for the sole purpose of watching the zeros get added to a publisher's bank account. And the only thing worse than a cash grab game is a movie tie-in game. Movie tie-in games have a long history of being awful, whether it be the often forgotten Fight Club game, which released a full 5 years after the movie's release, the infamous E.T. game, which single-handedly contributed to one of the worst years of loss in Atari's life, or even the more recent Jumanji game. Because there's nothing better than making a film on a board game, turning that board game into a real board game, making more films on that board game, and then turning those films on a board game into video games. A truly astonishing pipeline. 2015 marked a great year in gaming. Personally, some of my favourite games ever were released here, and I imagine that's a sentiment shared between a lot of us. Fallout 4, Batman Arkham Knight, Just Cause 3, Black Ops 3, and most importantly for us today, Mad Max. Mad Max the video game released on the 1st of September 2015 and was developed by Avalanche Studios, and one of these things directly contributed to Max getting off to a bad start. Let me ask you a question. What other Mad Max media released in 2015, 5 months before the game? Well, it was a little known film called Mad Max Fury Road. To the untrained eye, the era of video game tie-ins was making a comeback. This was clearly a soulless attempt to cash in on a great movie's name, but that's where the untrained eye would be wrong. Mad Max was nothing short of a gem. Avalanche, the studio behind Mad Max, would also work on Just Cause 3 this year, meaning Mad Max, the cash grab video game movie tie-in, would be lost in the hype of Fury Road and Just Cause 3, leaving Max in the dust when all was said and done. But we're here to kick up the dust again. To understand the Mad Max mystery, you first have to understand how it came to life. A Mad Max game had been thrown around the workshop from as early as 2008 and was intended to be released alongside an animated movie of the same name. And although little to nothing is known about this elusive animated movie, we do know that the mastermind behind the Mad Max series, George Miller, had met with the director of the critically acclaimed God of War series, Cody Barlog, to create the game. However, it fell through. Fast forward 5 years later, and Avalanche Studios, a studio which Barlog had consulted at, revealed they were creating a Mad Max game, initially intended to be a direct movie tie-in. The studio's big daddy, Warner Bros., had seen the success of the Batman Arkham franchise and its ability to create its own universe, stories and characters, and so sent Mad Max in that direction. But not fully. See, throughout the game, iconic in-movie locations like Gastown and Thunderdome can be visited, blurring the lines between the movie and video games further than the casual Mad Max fan would be able to differentiate between. The first hint at the Arkham fuel flowing through Max's veins had already been tainted, but alas, full production of the game began in May 2012. Mad Max was coming along nicely. Initially though, the game had been created to be a linear experience, but it had made more sense to make an open world game, something where the car-based combat and survivalist nature of the world of Mad Max could thrive. It was a long and winding road to release, but the day came and Mad Max had hit the shelves. In its first week, it flopped, coming second behind Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Yeah. So the first game was released 5 months after the widely heralded Fury Road, released in the same year as the universally beloved Just Cause 3, the same year as at what that point was going to be the final Arkham game, and above all else on the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5. In other words, Hydrogen Bomb vs. Coughing Baby. The Hydrogen Bomb would obviously win, with Metal Gear Solid 5 being nominated for Game of the Year, losing out only to 2015's other inclusion in the best year of gaming ever, The Witcher 3, while Mad Max was slowly and sadly lost to the sands of time, being seen as nothing more than Arkham in the desert. Mad Max would go on to receive pretty mixed reviews at launch, with it currently sitting on a 69% on Metacritic, but it's worth mentioning this is based off of 71 critic reviews. However, on the flip side, the user score is sitting on a healthy 7.8, which some might see as pretty middle of the road, but that's categorically wrong. Sitting at a nearly 8 out of 10 is a great score and a testament to the game's quality, showing the duality of the game's reception. The general consensus is that this game lacks a compelling story but makes up for it in pure fun. Driving through the wasteland, mowing war boys down and caving heads in is fun, but the game does lack that all-important narrative, and it's hard to disagree with this sentiment. I played the game 3 times over the years and couldn't tell you a single memorable narrative beat, apart from Chum Bucket being chum-napped. However, the gameplay, that's the fuel that makes this machine run. But we can talk about that soon. What you need to know is Mad Max went well under the radar, a forgotten gem in a 2015 filled with diamonds. It never really stood a chance, but we're here to give it one. So, how does it play? Does it carry that Arkham DNA into its gameplay? Let's take a look. Remember this? Well, I felt it right to mention where this all began, back in the halls of the Asylum. Arkham Asylum brought free-flow combat to the world, using Batman's unparalleled fighting technique and power to put the titular Caped Crusader's skill into the hands of the player, using a rhythm-based combat system aptly named the Free Flow system. Why was it named this, you might ask? Well, because you freely flow between enemies, landing a hit on one enemy and moving on to the next, rarely sticking around to strike up small talk. And you do this repeatedly, and this means the enemy pool gets thinned out over time, and you stand victorious when the dust settles. But how well does that translate over to Mad Max, a character not exactly known for his raw fighting skills and hand-to-hand dismantling of enemies with precise strikes and combo hits? Well, it doesn't. And that's good, because I don't think they were going for this. Mad Max takes the free flow formula and dumps it on its head. And just before we get into this section, there'll be a lot of comparisons made to the Arkham combat, as it's clearly the inspiration for the combat in this game, so that's just a word of warning. Anyway, back to the video. Batman is a character known for his fighting ability, and his pure athletic displays in combat, taking his enemies by surprise using fighting styles from every corner of the world. Max, on the other hand, fights like an English football fan when we lose in an international final. Haymakers, knees, knives and nerve damage. Max is brutal to the point of being cringe. The beauty found within the combat of the game comes wrapped in pure, unfiltered violence. Max hits like a truck, mixing heavy and light attacks to create some brutal concoctions of combat. But if we dig a little deeper below the wrapping, what we find is a new spin on the free flow formula. Whereas Batman can bounce between opponents smoothly, Max is more of a single target kind of guy, playing better if you just throw hits at one enemy at a time. Any more than that and this game's dodgy hit detection gets thrown off. You might have built up a 20 hit combo, but since Max isn't a highly skilled martial artist, he won't fling himself across the arena to his next target, preferring to shift his body weight to shift himself into position for a hit. And here's our issue. Max simply isn't as fluid as Batman. But it kind of works given the fighting style employed by Max and the weighty feel of his punches, and the bone-crunching sound design serves the immersion as well. If Max were to be jumping around combat arenas and throwing 60 hit combos at waves of enemies, this would take away the feeling that this game tries to engrave in its every action. The feeling that this is a grounded world, a world where the strong survive, and the weak, well, they end up impaled on spikes outside camps. Max perhaps isn't a better fighter than the people he faces, but he is stronger, but not stronger to the point of him being brutally overpowered like Batman is in Arkham Knight. You can feel the resistance of his knuckles cracking into people's chests, you can feel the weight of his boot as he stomps down on an enemy's neck. You get the impression Avalanche didn't actually want to try and replicate Rocksteady, preferring to mould the very drive shaft of Free Flow into a completely different beast, because aside from the core button layout being mostly the same, this combat is entirely new. An unexplored treasure trove of violence to uncover, and this begins with the countering system. When an enemy begins attacking you, you have two options, evade or counter. This sounds simple, and that's because Mad Max's combat is barely deeper than Arkham Asylum's, never mind City, Origins or Knights, but it makes up for its lack of new mechanics with its overall feel. When you counter an attack, you get a brief second where you and the enemy are locked in a stalemate, and this leaves them vulnerable for a counter-attack. Where Arkham did this in one button press, Mad Max requires a little more thinking before you launch your counter-attack. Is it worth landing a combo on the guy who just tried to hit you, or is it worth letting him push you off, losing your combo, but trading that for a chance to reposition and reprioritise your target? This means that Mad Max's combat begins before you've even thrown a punch. It starts when the enemy makes their first move, which they always tend to do before you make your first move, rushing the player 9 times out of 10. Whereas Arkham is more like a paintball match, spattering every enemy with a punch and painting the canvas of the arena with combos, Mad Max is more akin to a chess match. Not in a stuck-up, ooh, look at my cool analogy kind of way, but in the sense that, for the most part, you're focusing on one enemy. You're focusing all your efforts on one of them only, while keeping one eye open for the rest of the piece's individual moves, letting them come to you and finding where you slot into the equation. Heavy attacks, shoulder barges, and other strong moves also allow Max to stun an enemy, leaving them open to all forms of attack. The game also has a pseudo-grab mechanic, whereby if an enemy is backed up into a car, wall, or other solid object, they'll be grabbed by Max, who can finish them off with a few hits or send them stumbling back into the arena heavily damaged. This again means the player has to manage their targets wisely. Is it worth trying to back a simple war boy into a corner when a shield-wielding enemy is right there and waiting to be taken out of the field? Well, that's your call. But what isn't your call is the enemy variety. Mad Max has a huge variety of enemies, mostly down to its multiple factions, but what's interesting is just how many there are, with there being 9 different types of enemies in total. You've got your basic melee fighters. These are the standard grunts who attack in groups and are the most open to attacks. You've got the brawlers and the heavy hitters. These are the larger armoured enemies with strong melee attacks. The more defensive, well, defenders and the shield enemies who carry shields requiring special tactics to break, like strong attacks, and their own weapons. Then we have the ferals and berserkers, who are aggressive, unpredictable enemies that change relentlessly and act as a test of time reaction, because these guys are as mean as they come. Breaking combos using strong attacks can ensure these guys stay down though, but not if the weapon users who wield melee weapons like clubs, axes or knives get involved. All of these guys can be charged up by the War Criers, the non-combat enemies of the game who hype up fighters, increasing their aggression and durability, making them near the top of the target priority list unless you want a challenge. They're the melee enemies, but outside of that the world is littered with Lord Scrotus's dreaded lead slingers, or the snipers, who are found in towers or on vehicles, taking shots from a distance and surveying the area for any threats to their tower or themselves. But much rarer than that, we can encounter the flamethrower enemies. Again, these guys are rare, but this rarity is offset by their dangerous nature, balancing out quite nicely, using fire-based attacks to try and cook enemies alive, probably to eat given the context of the Mad Max world. Mad Max also has boss fights, yippee! These boss fights are against Australia's biggest nutjobs. No, not Mel Gibson, these guys, the top dogs. The biggest of the fish in the dried up sea of freaky dudes. These guys act as boss fights in the open world, combining usual combat with more unique sections. These fights can be more easily tackled by engaging with NPCs in the open world, who can give little tips to take down these freaky fucks. It's a nice break from the sometimes monotonous nature of the game's combat, because these guys come with a whole base to fight through, unique gameplay, background and combat mechanics, and they make for a truly unique experience which can be played through at any point you choose, although it's worth taking into consideration your level, skill level, and weighing it up against your own mental strength to figure out if you actually want to take these guys on. An early game encounter against a top dog called Stump Grinder sees you play cat and mouse against the perverted Purple Pratt, as you try and take him down through his own flamethrowers to weaken him before taking him out for good, stomping his head in. The variety of top dogs means that no two counters are the same, and the feeling of taking down one of these guys feels like something ripped straight from a movie. It's great and makes the world feel more real. Of course, certain people would rise to power, and given the context of the story, it makes sense Max would want to take them out. One thing which makes the combat a little more engaging, aside from the gut-wrenching kills and disgustingly beautiful animations, is the fun variety of weapons. Most weapons are two-handed, bats, hammers, steel pipes, and these are great. A brutal spice in the mixture of combat. But the added addition of shiv finishers mean Max can have a weapon on hand whenever he needs it, providing he picked up one or two for the road. These act as special combo takedowns, taking advantage of downed enemies to put them down for good. Max also has access to his very own skill tree, much like the Wayne Tech upgrade points of Gotham's Guardian, but instead of using his own made up currency, Max uses literal scrap. We can pimp Max out with a few different takedowns, including but not limited to a wall finisher, a shotgun gut shot, and a limb breaking finisher. These skills are earned throughout the game and just add a little extra oomph to the game's skill set. But the best feature this game added, bar none, is the thunder stick. Honestly, I have never laughed harder than when I jammed one of these into an enemy and watched them get literally fucking disintegrated. It was so funny, and this entire weapon just makes this game worth playing by itself. In its totality, Mad Max's combat is fun, brutal, and cringeworthy in all of the best ways. It takes the iconic free flow combat and, well, it doesn't deepen it or reinvent it, but it makes it as equally as fun, and in the end, that's what matters. Some of the best bits of the game come in combat, and the lack of stealth mechanics beside a one-button takedown make for a truly immersive experience, not doing anything out of its own wheelhouse and keeping the game's tone even through its combat. But the on-foot combat isn't even the end of it, and although it perhaps got more features than I've mentioned today, the very fact it works and works well is a miracle given the fact it could have been an Arkham clone. But that's the beauty of this combat system. It isn't Arkham, and I don't think it was ever trying to be. I mean, we all take inspirations from things we deem to be perfect, or at least better than what we can do, and I think this is where the comparisons are drawn from. Mad Max took one of the most fun and accessible combat systems as its muse and turned it into its own. More brutal though, but that's just the half of it. After all, what's Mad Max without the wheels? Traversal is a big part of any open world game, whether it be the webs of Peter Parker, the Dark Knight's Batmobile, the trusty wingsuit in Just Cause, or the horses of Red Dead Redemption. But we need to take a look at a different kind of horsepower here, about 130 horses at least. Mad Max lets you customise your own magnum opus from scratch, giving you the power to bring your own war machine to the wasteland without consequence of the police or even a higher power striking you down. You are the artist here, the car is your paintbrush and the wasteland is your canvas. When you begin with the magnum opus, you'll find it to be a husk, a disturbed melody of parts lying in wait for you to bring to life. And when you fulfill the prophecy Chumbucket, your trusty Blackfinger mechanic, spoke to you, you get the power of the Angel of Combustion, being able to make the car your own. Finding scrap in the open world and through missions opens your wasteland bank account, and with this newfound wealth, upgrades can be made which mould your canvas of combustion into the vehicle it was always meant to be. From battering rams to rim spikes to a harpoon to the almighty V8 engine, the magnum opus is yours to design, and with this freedom comes a plethora of ways to interact with the various mechanics presented to us while driving. See, the driving isn't just a part of the game, it's the engine which drives the whole game forward and provides us with some of the best moments this entire thing has to offer. See, hand-to-hand combat has been there, whether it be Middle-earth, Gotham City, or the streets of Hong Kong, whether it be taking down an orc with a grudge or a thug who won't budge. Hand-to-hand combat has been done, and done very well. But on the flip side of the coin, vehicular combat has never been done particularly well, not to the extent of its on-foot equivalent anyway, and this is where Mad Max comes in. Mad Max's driving combat is more akin to a dogfight than Death Rally. Subtle movements and balancing the brake with the accelerator is key, and oh hell, who am I kidding, you just smash the cars together until one blows up, it's not that complicated. This is right in a way, but in the same sense, you can make the car combat as close to a dogfight as you want, genuinely using skills picked up from years of driving in video games to get the better of your enemies, who 9 out of 10 times will outnumber you, pinning you in using various tactics to try and slow you down. But if you're good enough, you might be able to slip out of their grasp and use one of your own moves to hit back. Mad Max's car fights bring some of the best vehicular combat in gaming, which thanks to the vast amount of customisation can be tackled however you please. It all depends on the car you've made. A more nimble, faster Speed Demon might be great for clearing the wasteland and its various dunes, but one good hit to the side and it stands in danger of being blown to the heavens, whereas a more armoured, bulky tank might be slower and have a weaker turning circle. But it will be able to take the hits the weaker car can't, and this is where the game delves into the depths of the classic give and take mechanic. What do you prioritise? Speed, attack, defence, armour, control? They all have upsides, but all also leave you vulnerable in other places. It's all very well being able to kill everything in front of you, but if you need an exit plan, then you need speed. And if your need for speed is hampered, then your will to live needs to outweigh it, something that won't matter if you can't fight back. See, it's the circle of Max, a never-ending wheel of preparation that never truly ends, and this is where the game shines. You can customise basically everything about your Magnum, but the customisation doesn't stop there because you can trick Chumbucket out with the tools of his trade too. The Harpoon allows for Chumbucket to grab onto enemy cars, environmental hazards and other vehicles which can make for some devastating results. The Thunderpoon basically acts like a missile launcher, there's not really much elaboration needed there. Max himself can fire his shotgun from the driver's seat, and a well-placed slug can result in huge damage. And as well as this, Max can actually take control of a sniper to engage in long-range warfare, which proves to be pretty useless throughout the game's runtime, but it's there nonetheless. And finally, the car itself can have a plethora of defensive and offensive upgrades put on it. Border spikes prevent anyone from jumping onto your car, a threat you don't realise is there until it happens to you. Rim spikes do damage to other cars while in combat, and side burners are definitely some of the most fun weapons in vehicular combat, burning the enemies to the side of you to a crisp if they're unfortunate to get close enough. These all come together to ensure that the car you build is truly your own, and this is even further amplified by the HUD ornaments, which can be collected from the various convoy leaders around the map. Convoys patrol their set routes and usually consist of a convoy leader, that's the main target, and the cars surrounding him. These are the vehicular equivalents of the top dogfights, and are a genuine test of your driving ability, because even the early game convoys are hard, testing your driving, ingenuity, and everything in between. These have a boss fight feel to them, and often lead to some of the best moments in car gameplay. But after they're dealt with, the leader will drop a HUD ornament, and these give buffs to stats, whether it be defense, attack, speed, or some other bonus you might need in the unforgiving wasteland. Driving in this game is a masterstroke. The cars feel weighty, and every car feels different, and the game knows this, so it gives you the option to build Archangels, preset designs which Chumbucket can build. These include, but aren't limited to, the Jack, a true jack of all trades, the Speed Demon, which is, well, a speed demon, and the coolest name and description combo ever, the Rule of War, which description reads: the soldier, the trusted warrior, armed for sacred warfare in desolate and hellish lands. Before infidel hordes, here comes righteousness. That is truly the Rule of War. Anyway, the variety of vehicles here is insane, with each enemy faction also having their own personal GTA garage full of cars, with each faction having unique vehicles depending on their habitat and battle plan. But don't let that overshadow the fact that you can drive the motherfucking V8 Interceptor in this game. God, I love video games. There's also a Rockstar energy drink car, like, who asked for that? Anyway, Mad Max is a game of two halves. The better half is the driving, it's truly something else, and easily the finest part of this game. And part which has kept me coming back for a decade now. But what about the canvas we paint the magnum opus with? The question we're presented with first is, how do you make a giant desert wasteland fun? Well, you do the opposite of Fallout New Vegas. I'm sorry, I really hate that game. Well, you put it in a twisted alternate reality with fetishist underlings, cool death cars, and even cooler locations. The wasteland of Mad Max isn't the biggest open world ever. It's big enough to feel vast, but not empty, and I think this is where they strike the fine balance between empty and atmospheric. Because the wasteland is filled with atmosphere that captures the feeling of the movie so well. The skybox is a huge part of this. It feels vast at night, in a time where the wasteland feels almost liminal. Like, you know what was here at one time, but now there's nothing but sand and reminders of a bygone era of the human race. For me, what makes the wasteland so memorable is how free it makes you feel. It truly never closes you in. You genuinely feel like this is a place with no real law. It's a land of vultures and killers, people trying to survive in a world that doesn't want them anymore, and those who built outposts and demand some level of respect are heralded as kings. And in turn, this makes you feel small, a small cog in a giant machine. The feeling of insignificance creeps over you tenfold when the storms roll in. These sandstorms are the game's way of telling you how weak even your wonderful magnum opus is when faced with something grander than even it can dream to be. Ironic when you consider the rewards that you can reap from the belly of the sandy beast, with scrap piles as far as the eye can see making your opus a deadlier weapon. Still not as formidable as Mother Nature herself, but as far as gifts go, this is a nice one, if not a deadly one. These storms are brutal, tearing your car apart, tearing the very fibre of the world piece to piece. Not for any reason. Nature is cold, cruel, and unforgiving to even you, the main character. And even in the heat-stricken wasteland, the world understands it can't play favourites. You're all suffering the same fate, lost in a desert which in itself is lost in the great unknown. You're at war with the elements out here. Out here in the wasteland, war is God. And if war is God, God cannot be all good, nor all powerful. Which means for all intensive purposes, you're alone. Max is in touch with the wasteland more than you'd think at first glance. He's alone, all he ever knew is dead, it existed and is now taken away by the sands of time, in the same way the world is literally taken by sand and time. The map is littered with survivors who can give information, scrap, missions and tips on how to best deal with those who need dealing with, and this does make the world feel alive, but not to the extent the environmental storytelling does. I came across a camp, and early on in this camp I came across this plank that was hung over a long drop, and something as small as this made me think. It sparked images of people being made to walk the plank, fitting considering that the sand here for the most part used to be water. It's moments like this which make you think, make you realise that this world and its wonders, its horrors, will be here long after you're gone, and were here before you got here. It makes the world feel comforting, in a way. While the enemies you face change, the car you drive changes, and your outlook on the characters shifts, the world doesn't. Each cave, outpost and location is filled with a unique passion and design, and this makes the world feel real. Like, despite its unchanging and cruel nature, it still has passion packed into every corner. No two outposts feel the same, the storm hits you at different angles, bringing varying gifts from the gods of scrap. The enemies react to you, but you're not the focal point of the world. Patrols, enemies and battles all still remain in their natural state with or without you. And the more death you inflict and the more you see, the more you understand that Mad Max's map is a masterclass in isolation. I'm sure we've all felt isolated at one point or another in a video game, but in this world you feel truly on your own despite Chumbucket's presence mere feet away from you. You feel the desperation, the isolation and the pain Max harbours through the very world he inhabits, and the need he feels to reach the coveted plains of silence, where he hopes to find some sort of peace. And the story of Max's ultimate failure to save anyone he knows or loves is as tragic as it is fitting. Max loses Hope and her daughter Glory, two people he could have saved, two innocent lives who got caught up in the crazy world which happened to be their home. Chumbucket dies trying to protect the magnum opus, and his family were long dead when we met him. Mad Max isn't a happy game, it has very little levity, preferring to pummel into you through its story and world that there is no hope, no one makes it out unscathed, and perhaps this ending, Max surviving the awful hand he was dealt, is more of a punishment than his death could ever be. The world and its vast plains, its beautiful skies and its masterful environmental storytelling all come together in tandem with Max as a character to create one of the best examples of a character not only existing in, but truly being at one with the world they inhabit. The wasteland is dark, lonely, and only breaks the monotony of misery with the darkest horrors mankind can think of. Blood bags, humans skewered to posts, families torn apart for the sake of sending a message, and things too evil that go beyond human comprehension. Mad Max's landscape is as much of a character in itself as Max is, and that's why they're being spoken about with each other here. I feel some sort of connection to the world of Mad Max despite its ugliness, because on the surface it's disgusting, boring and empty, but just beneath that ugly wrapping paper is a world filled with care, where the strong survive and the weak are cast aside. But in gameplay, it really shines bright, bringing a balance of gamified world building and immersive wasteland. Scrotus has an iron grip on the world, littering it with monstrous structures called scarecrows, having camps set up every few hundred metres, posting snipers around, and much, much more. But throughout the runtime we can slowly begin to chip away at its reign, taking everything back and trying to bring some sort of law to a lawless land, whether it be with our harpoon, our bare hands or our ramming grill. The world of Mad Max is there to be taken apart. With the environmental hazards racing you to dismantle the desert, it becomes a challenge, but a welcome one. There's a clear sense of progression throughout the game. The map is dense and full of scrap to be looted and enemies to be killed, but it never feels overwhelming. In fact, I wish there was a little more content here, more top dogs and enemy camps, because that's where the game really shines. That's where it makes up for its story, because the story isn't worth talking about in depth. In fact, the world itself contradicts the story and Max. The story is shallow, pretty lifeless, and overall lackluster. It isn't awful, it's serviceable, it does a job. But Mad Max thrives on its stellar gameplay, its gorgeously crafted open world, and its fun and memorable spontaneity within the gameplay. Cars being flung left and right, crashes being brutal enough to be 7th in a Russian car crash compilation, and storm encounters that fling Max into the sky. All of this come together to provide some truly enjoyable moments, which the story, for whatever reason, just couldn't provide. Mad Max isn't a perfect game, far from it. When it came out, it was seen as a somewhat lackluster movie tie-in, but if you look past its initial release and into its fibres, you see a game which went under the radar, and how could it not? I mean, it was going up against Metal Gear Solid 5 on the same day. It really didn't stand a chance, but even 10 years later, this game has kept me coming back. The world and the gameplay are key contributors to this. It's just plain fun. There's not a whole lot of meat on the bones, but not every game needs to be The Witcher or Red Dead Redemption 2. Sometimes a game can be a 7 out of 10. We need these type of gems to find the polished diamonds, and I think Mad Max knows where it stands in the history of video games. It's good, it can be great, but unfortunate timing and poor marketing meant it never got the chance to truly shine. But that can't be changed now. All we can do is go back and appreciate what we have. And what we have is a fun, engaging, and lovingly crafted Mad Max game, with all of the mechanics you'd expect to be in a game trying to carry the Mad Max title. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts on this game, as I know it's one that people either really love or really aren't very sure on. So type your thoughts down below and I'll reply to as many of you as I can. And again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, maybe in another Wasteland.